welcome to Business Morning. This morning is a midweek trade right here in Lagos, Nigeria, and definitely we see the markets buzzing all over the world with commodities. Also, let's get a check on some of the top stories now. We're seeing oil prices. They traded largely flat earlier today after, pairing early gains as fresh U.S.-Iran strikes reignited supply concerns and is casting doubt on a fragile ceasefire. But it's such a volatile market. It was up about 0.30% around past 9 a.m. This morning, $91.72 a barrel. That's for Brent crude. WTI still sub 90, $88.37 a barrel, 0.17% higher. Both contracts climbed nearly 2% in early Asian trading amid renewed hostilities. Oil prices slipped roughly 3% in the previous session, reaching their lowest levels in 7 weeks. So we're still seeing that volatility week in, week out, right there in the oil market. Let's get a check on how your money performed yesterday. That's for the local bourse now. We see it close higher yesterday as the NGX All-Share Index gained about 53 basis points, continuing that positive push we've seen from Friday last week. Year-to-date returns, that's about 57.25%. Rally was driven by, Airtel Africa, First Holdco, and Transcore. We see market activity that was quite mixed. We see volume that was in the green, about 1.27 billion more compared to the previous trading day. Value, 57.87 billion. We see deals there, 56,880. That was traded yesterday. So if you flip over to other parts of the market now, we see for the top gainers yesterday, Airtel Africa there. We call it a sleeper, but it woke up yesterday. 10% rise, just like the previous week. Then we see Abe Mortgage Bank, 9.76% higher for the laggards. Full 10% drops there. Learn Africa, NACO, and Okomu Oil, they're closing at 1,575 naira. Flip over to other parts now. We see for the top trades, Sterling, that's financial services, topping the trades by volume yesterday, with likes of GTCO, FCMB trading 34.39 million. That was the volume of trade yesterday. So that's how your money performed. We'll definitely see if the midweek trade continues in bullish territory today. To other stories now. The International Monetary Fund has warned Nigeria to exercise caution over a proposed $5 billion total return swap financing deal with the First Abu Dhabi Bank, describing such arrangements as opaque and potentially risky. Speaking during a briefing on the IMF's 2026 Article 4 consultation report, the fund's resident representative in Nigeria, Christina Baker, said while Nigeria's access to international capital markets has improved, complex financing structures like total return swaps could expose the country to hidden risk and transparency concerns. Meanwhile, in a reaction to that, and a post on X, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, the coordinating minister of the economy, it says the federal government has welcomed the International Monetary Fund's positive assessment of Nigeria's economic reform, saying recent policy measures are restoring, macroeconomic stability and strengthening investor confidence. But he also says that the government says, despite, global pressures from rising energy and food prices linked to tensions in the Middle East, he says Nigeria's economy has remained resilient with stable investor sentiment and improving economic outlook. Authorities also, pledging there to sustain reforms aimed at reducing poverty, boosting investment, and supporting long-term inclusive growth. So that was a response there from Mr. Taiwo Oyedele yesterday on his X page. To other stories now. The federal government has reaffirmed its commitments to accelerating Nigeria's export-led growth agenda under the African Continental Free Trade Area, unveiling opportunities for businesses to access $1 billion AFCFTA credit facility designed to boost, production, competitiveness, and intra-Africa trade. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investments, so Jumoke Oluwole, disclosed this yesterday during the second quarter 2026 meeting of the AFCFTA Central Coordination Committee held in Abuja. But yeah, that was Mr. Taiwo's reaction to what the IMF said That was on his X page yesterday. All right, to other matters now. Following a consumer complaint against Casco Electronic Co. Limited on January 16, 2025, regarding the sale of a defective solar battery paid for in February 2025, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission have sealed the operational premises of the company. FCCPC have been so busy these days. According to the FCCPC, the enforcement action is not punitive in the first instance, but is protective and corrective. The sealing will remain in force until the Commission is satisfied that the prior breach has been fully remedied, at which point a compliance certificate will be issued under Section 150, subsection 3. Take a listen.
Solar inverter. And the Commission accordingly invites this undertaking, Casco Electronics, to come before the Commission to answer questions. Casco Electronics refused. Again, the Commission issued summons to Casco Electronics. Casco Electronics refused to come. Subsequently, there was a compliance notice again sent to Casco Electronics. Casco Electronics refused to appear before the Commission.
Alaba is not known for some of these things. Casco is a reputable company, but I just believe maybe they have one or two issues. The only problem, he has refused to come and answer the FCCP.
All right, now to our first conversation. As Nigeria and Africa are pushing to close its massive electricity access gap while transitioning to cleaner energy sources, solar mini grids are increasingly attracting the attention of investors, development finance institutions, and private sector operators. Beyond expanding power access, these projects are emerging as major opportunities for infrastructure investment, green finance, and long-term economic growth. Joining us now to discuss the business case for solar mini grids and the future of renewable energy investment in Nigeria and Africa, we have Mr. Abba Abubakar Aliyu, MD/CEO, Rural Electrification Agency, joining us from our Abuja studios. Great to have you on the show, sir. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Fantastic. It's great to have you. So I'd like you to react to the last story we had there with the FCCPC there, really busy this week. And, you know, they're selling a business there, selling defective solar batteries. Talk to me about this. How do you navigate this? Because this is what you actually use most of the time to help bridge the electricity gap in rural areas and also in the urban centers. How are you managing, you know, some of these, you know, bad eggs, you know, at this point?
Thank you. I think it's a very critical situation, and it's something of a great concern to the federal government. If you are following the activities of Rural Electrification Agency, for example, last year, in collaboration with a Chinese company, following the trip that Mr. President did to China, we established the first of its kind, a testing lab for the Rural Electrification Agency, for example, to have the technical capabilities to be able to test PV panels that are being imported. And this was not just didn't just come up as by chance. It was as a result of what we discovered, that a number of companies are importing used or decommissioned PV panels from other countries into Nigeria and installing these panels to address the need of the society. It is as a result of that we decided to, partner with other government institutions, for example, like Standard Organization of Nigeria, to make sure that we address this menace. We have established the testing lab already. It's working, and we are testing all the equipment randomly in different areas that we are using. Secondly, is also doing something a bit more strategic, and that is now localizing the assembly and manufacturing of PV panels and batteries in the country. Also, if you are following the activities of Rural Electrification Agency, last year we held the first of its kind, the National Nigerian Renewable Energy Innovation Forum, where the Vice President chaired that session. And through that session, we were able to incentivize the emergence of about 8 manufacturing companies that now have, some of them have already started the assembly and manufacturing of PV panels in Nigeria. To date, now a made in Nigeria PV panels in Ikotun in Lagos is being exported to other African countries. And all these panels that are manufactured in Nigeria, based on the standard that we gave them, they have a barcode, which with your mobile phone, you can scan it and see the history of that PV panels. And once that barcode is tampered, it won't work, the panels will not work. So we started to build in these things to make sure that we eliminate the importation or the recycling of this use or substandard equipment in the renewable space. But definitely, apart from Rural Electrification Agency, like the Consumer Protection Council, the Standard Organization, the Nigerian Electricity Management Services, they all have that technical responsibility, and they are doing this, participating in making sure that we address this situation.
Right, and another thing is securing the borders, I guess, so that these substandard products don't even come into the country. Are you liaising with customs at this point, letting them know that some of these substandard solar products should not coming to the country?
Oh, absolutely. We have written and informed the customs with our even standardization and the technical specification. This is also something, yes, that we are partnering with the Nigerian Customs Service.
All right, so, at this point, we see the solar mini-grids, they're gaining significant momentum, across Nigeria and Africa. In your opinion, what is driving this growth in investor interest, when it comes to distributed renewable energy infrastructure? What do you think is driving that? Are they in it for profits, or is it really bridging that gap when it comes to energy access?
Yeah, so a number of factors is changing that trend. The first that we mentioned is the global trend. Globally, most of the countries in the world are committing huge resources into the renewable energy, specifically solar. If you look at it, for example, the United States committed $1 trillion for renewable energy, solar, and AI infrastructure. China as a country are committing so much dollars in terms of resources in promoting solar to the extent now that the capacity they have is much more than the total capacity of the rest of the world. Just last week, even Indonesia committed over $170 million for a solar project. So one, the global financiers are channeling resources into that space, and that is make it now something that everybody has to key into it. But in Nigeria, it's not only because of the global trend. In Nigeria, it's because of the strategic nature of the distributed renewable energy. One, it is more cost-effective to use the distributed renewable energy to address the access challenge facing the country. It's rather than you extending the national grid, building transmission line, distribution line, and connecting the rural areas or peri-urban areas, it doesn't make economic sense if you do the financial modeling of that total project. It makes more economic sense to go to the communities, build the solar infrastructure, generate the renewable electrons, build distribution network, meter them, and connect the communities. It makes much more sense, and it even creates more reliability. So in a situation whereby there's any issue with the national grid, such communities are not affected because they are isolated and they are enjoying their electricity. The third reason is the environmental and sustainability reason. We know the cost of using other sources of generation on our environment and on the health. And that is why it becomes much more effective to utilize the distributed renewable energy. So in Nigeria, it's costs. It's also the availability of international financing. It's also because of the fact that it's much more effective and environmentally friendly to use the distributed access. And that is why under the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he committed the biggest publicly funded renewable energy fund and financing to Rural Electrification Agency to address the electricity access challenge. A whooping $750 million that will incentivize a private sector financing of about $1.1 billion to electrify 17.5 million Nigerians by deploying 1,350 mini grids, of which 250 of them are going to be interconnected mini grids, which for the first time now in the history of Nigeria, over 1,000 mini grids are being project developed and in the country. Just last week, we were in Kogi, where we commissioned one of the mini grids, 704 kilowatt in Olamoboro, and we also did the groundbreaking of 3 interconnected mini grid in Eyimba 1, Eyimba 2, and Angpa, which would inject about 29 megawatts of capacity. So a lot is taking place, and we are as a country, we are embracing this, and we are deploying this infrastructure to make Nigeria have a sustainable, reliable, and affordable electricity.
Okay. All right. Let's look at some of the activity when it comes to importation of some of these solar products. Now, for Nigeria, solar import volume, June 2024 to June 2025, about 1,721 megawatts of solar panels were imported. 2025 full year, 2.9 million solar panels imported. March 2026 alone, 1.2 gigawatts of solar imports recorded, up about 519%. So far, import value for H1 2024, 206.82 billion naira. H1 2025, 242.68 billion naira. And, looking at the solar business value chain, we did have a guest, a player in that sector recently, and he did mention a trend, a growing trend in Nigeria's solar market, where we see the Chinese manufacturers are getting to the end users and kind of knocking off, the middlemen. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on the show earlier.
That comes from Rural Electrification Agency, which is the body that looks after everything that has to do with renewable energy in Nigeria, and policy players that will ensure that the registered integrators are protected from the influx of the other players in outside Nigeria. At least there must be some roles that should not be occupied by players outside the Nigerian region. We believe so much that there's a larger opportunity here. We have the skill set, we have the know-how, we have the brains. So why import that if we don't have the machinery, but let us use our brains?
Right. So he's trying to say the middlemen are not protected when it comes to this value chain. They're being knocked out with the manufacturers going straight to the end users. How are you seeing that?
Well, I would if you look at the numbers, I would slightly disagree with him. So let's start, for example, let's pick the importation figures that you showed before the interview. For the first time under this leadership in the history of the Nigeria, we have a reverse trend in the importation of the cells versus a complete solar panel. Before, all the figures before this, what we are importing are ready-made panels that we are bringing in from China into the country. But last year, we recorded a change in the trend, which we tweeted and we showed the fact. What we imported we imported more of the cells rather than a complete ready-made solar panel, which shows the drive for the assembly and the manufacturing trend that is taking place in Nigeria. And we are working towards reversing that. If you go, for example, to around the Lagos-Shagamu axis, you will see 3 manufacturing PB panels assembly plant, Trinos, AfriCell, Tricell, all coming up, and they will start production this year. I told you now, we made in Nigeria solar panels in Ikotun. It's been manufactured and it's been exported to other African countries. So we are changing the trends of that manufacturing. And as at today, in the pipeline of the manufacturing, we are expecting 3.7 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity. By the end of next year, the total manufacturing capacity Nigeria will have will supersede even the need of the country, but we will start to serve even other African countries. So this is a trend that is changing. First. Secondly, you see, we can't dislodge China. We can't just wake up to say we want to dislodge the manufacturers in China. 95% of all renewable energy equipment manufacturing is done in China. All other, not only Nigeria, any other country is relying on China's manufacturing capacity. So we are working, the kind of now program that we are designing is to make sure that the Nigerian company have a piece of the pie. And that is why we created the Renewable Energy Service Company. All rural electrification agencies projects that we are deploying are being deployed through this RES course, Renewable Energy Service Companies. Before the coming of Mr. President, we only have about 20 RES courses. But as of today, we have over 150 RES courses that are deploying infrastructure across the country and even in other African countries. We have them all over, and you can see that all these infrastructures are done by this RES course. Beyond that, even the project that we are doing now catalyze the emergence of fintechs. We have many Nigerian fintechs that have now emerged, and they're into the business of revenue collection, revenue assurance, grid, mini-grid monitoring. So these trends are changing, and there are a lot of Nigerian participation. But as time goes on, you will see us dislodging completely and building the Nigerian ecosystem.
Right. So it seems also the issue really is most of these foreign importers there, they import the bulk and they still sell to retailers, here. So why can't, the Nigerian businesses bring in, these products and now, distribute, instead of having the foreigners, they bring it in here and they also sell to the retailers?
That's exactly what is happening. You hardly see that. Of course, there are cases of direct Chinese companies, manufacturers selling directly to consumers. I won't rule that out. But in all our programs, we have made it clear that even a Chinese company has to partner with a local company to create a service center. You can't even sell our product to our projects that we are implementing if you don't have a domesticated Nigerian service center. That is first. And secondly, you have to work through with any of our renewable energy service companies. That has been done to the extent now that even our renewable energy service companies, they get them to manufacture the product in their own Nigerian company's name for them to manufacture that. So all this is being done. But definitely,
is there a legal framework to make sure this is actually the way the value chain works, so that it's not the foreigners and the manufacturers selling direct, to some of these consumers?
So this is something that the Honorable Minister of Power is already working on. We have already presented the draft, because when we did the Nigerian Renewable Energy Innovation Forum, where we incentivized the investment into the manufacturing, they complain about something like this. And that is why we want to now, we are working on developing a local content policy in the renewable space, where we looked into what, for example, countries like Ethiopia, in the last 3 years, Ethiopia wasn't manufacturing NEP renewable equipment, but now they are the biggest manufacturers of renewable equipment. We have seen what India did also to reverse the importation and dependence on Chinese manufacturers. The same thing with Thailand. So we looked into that and we crafted a Nigerian concept looking at the uniqueness of the Nigerian situation. And this is something that is undergoing review by the private sector, by the financiers, by the renewable energy service companies. And at the right time, the Honorable Minister would have a stakeholder engagement to review that local context and localization policy, which once we agree on it, it will now be sent to the Federal Executive Council for approval. So this is something that is at the top burner of the Honorable Minister of Power's table.
All right, definitely we're hoping for a win-win situation here in this value chain. Local producers, protected, and at some point we get to a level where we actually produce all of these materials right here in Nigeria, so we can keep all of those dollars in. Thank you so much, Mr. Abba Abubakar Aliyu, MD CEO, Rural Electrification Agency. Thank you for coming on the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, there's more. After the moment, do stay with us. All right, so the nation's newly created Office of the Tax Ombudsman is opening its doors to the public with a push to make tax dispute resolution faster, cheaper, and more transparent. The tax ombudsman, Mr. John Wabweze, who made the announcement at a meeting with finance correspondents, says the office was established under the new tax administration framework to strengthen fairness, accountability, and taxpayer confidence, serving as an independent bridge between taxpayers and revenue authorities through mediation, conciliation, and alternative dispute resolution.
In efficient revenue mobilization, but also in fairness, accessibility, and dispute resolution, which rises to assuring public trust. And when the public is confident that the tax system is fair to them, compliance increases. And with increase in compliance, the revenue for the country goes up. So essentially, that is the bedrock of this office itself. Now, as an independent and impartial institution, we provide the taxpayers with accessible, timely, and cost-effective mechanism for addressing complaints.
All right, let's look at education now. As Nigeria expands access to higher education through student loan financing, questions are increasingly being raised about sustainability, repayment structures, and the long-term economic impact of education debt. While student financing could improve access to tertiary education and support human capital development, there are also concerns about graduate employability, responsible lending, and the risk of creating a future student debt burden. Well, joining us now to unpack all of this, we have Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, is the Chief Executive of NELFund. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Great to have you on the show, sir. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I see NELFund, I see you guys have been quite busy. I see the student loan disbursement, application and beneficiaries. 1.8 million applications received. Beneficiaries, 1.586921 students. That's the latest one for the 9th of June 2026. If we move on there, we see institutional fees paid, about 183 billion, upkeep allowances paid, 98 billion, total loan disbursement, 282 billion naira. So you've been quite busy. But we're seeing recent reports circulating on social media alleging that the federal government has suspended the student upkeep allowances. A claim you have since described as false and misleading. But what does this episode tell us about public confidence in the student loan scheme so far?
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the question. And I think I'd probably want to start at the point before the launch of the scheme. And I can tell you that before we launched this scheme on the 24th of May 2024, there had been skepticism. A lot of people had been saying that this was never going to take off. It was a gimmick. It was something that government was doing to fool the people. And then, of course, we got to the launch and we launched the program. And then, a few of those skeptics dropped away. And we carried on with the activities of the program. Of course, there were also people saying that, it was never going to get to the students. This was some sort of arrangement for the money to be siphoned and taken elsewhere. Again, we overcame that. Students were getting funds, people were giving testimonies about the funds they were receiving, schools were receiving funds, they were getting it. So, at every stage in this process, we have been dogged with, one, piece of skepticism, some cynicism, some doubt about this. And at every stage, we've overcome it. And, you can't blame the Nigerian public. So many things have been promised to Nigerians over the last 6 decades that have either not materialized or have been wrongly or poorly implemented. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was very deliberate about this particular scheme. And his view, and I think you would have seen from the amount of commitment to education in general, that one of the things that he's fixated on is ensuring that Nigerians get the education they need so that they can be more employable, they can be more useful to themselves, and they can be more useful to the country. So, this latest round of, things floating around on the internet saying, this is suspended, this is not going to go ahead, it's just another round of, falsehood. And who knows why it's being generated. But, our job is to march on and continue to hunt and look for students who need this succor, who need this support, and to provide them with the opportunity to be able to get into institutions where they can learn and become more employable.
Right. And looking at this issue about upkeep allowance, is it that it just comes, sometimes it comes slow? Is that the issue?
So, yeah, let me, this is a brand new scheme. It's a brand new scheme. We started on the 24th of May. The demand has been incredible. When you start talking about, government disbursing 282 billion naira, with, nearly 1.6 million beneficiaries, and 1.8 million have applied, it's a scheme that's going to get increasingly complex as time goes on. Let me tell you, we've paid 301 institutions to date. We've paid 1.6 million beneficiaries. And a lot of those beneficiaries were paying them every month. Our systems have to be under constant review. Our cybersecurity needs to be under constant review. We've got to be looking at ways of optimizing what we're doing, increasing our efficiency and our efficacy. And we are having at times to, stop, evaluate where we are, look at what improvements we need to make, and then make those improvements for the sustainability of the program. This can sometimes lead to delays. It can sometimes lead to delays, but it's like anything. If you're building a road or you've built a road, at some point you've got to maintain that road. If you're going to maintain the road, you've got to shut parts of it down. That's essentially what's happening with us. We have to constantly renew what we're doing so that we can put ourselves in a position where we can serve the public better.
All right, moving away from that now, one major concern globally is the risk of, a student debt crisis. What safeguards do you think should be put in place to avoid that scenario in Nigeria?
Okay, so thank you for that. So I can confidently tell you that as of today, this is probably one of the most soft-faced student loan schemes you will find anywhere in the world. And believe me, we've been looking. We have been directed to make these loans interest-free. The president doesn't want students burdened with interest. We've been directed as an agency to ensure that students don't have to pay back until they're able to. In other words, if a student doesn't get a job, they can't pay, so we won't ask them to pay. The way this is set up is that students or obligors pay or start repaying 2 years after they've completed their NYSC. effectively, in most cases, that's 3 years after they've graduated. And you know what? They don't even pay themselves unless they're self-employed. It is the employer that goes to a register, looks at the NIN and says, this candidate that I'm about to employ has a student loan. And then the employer is obliged to take 10% of that person's income, their salary, their wages, however they're paid, 10%, and remit that 10% to the fund. There's no tenor on this, so there's no, this is how much you owe, you must pay back by such and such a date in such and such a year. This is a pay as you earn. And, you know, if people never finish, you know, paying the loan, they don't. It is the repayments are not tied to what is owed. The repayments are tied to what is earned. If you're earning 0, you pay 0. If you're earning $1 million, you pay 10% of $1 million, 100,000. So that's the way it's working. It really is, this isn't a grant, but, you know, the president has made this so comfortable, so easy for the students, and of course for us who are implementing it, to be able to ensure that we get the maximum number of people through classrooms so that they can begin to develop themselves to be the best that they can be.
All right, so, you know, looking ahead, what does success for Nigeria's student financing system, what does that look like, really?
So, you know, we have a very high population in this country, and it's often described as an advantage. What we're trying to achieve here is to ensure that it becomes the advantage that everyone expects it to be. So, for us, success looks like this. We have a very high number of our population educated and able to fend for themselves, able to create wealth, able to earn an income, able to support the economy. Of course, that's not just on the academic side. In order for us to do that, we also have the mandate to do vocational training, skills training, because it's not everybody that's academic, it's not everybody that's a philosopher. There are people who have very practical talents, which can be developed into very practical skills. So the future for this scheme looks like this. We should be able to expand the number of educated people in this country, which we believe is way too low today. We should be able to ensure that those people are productive to the point where they can help build this nation and pay taxes back into the system that then will keep this scheme sustainable. So, you know, there is an ecosystem that's being created here. There's a method to what we're trying to do. But of course, you know, sometimes when an artist starts to paint, you don't see what the whole thing looks like until the final stroke of the brush is put on it. We are at the beginning of this. I certainly won't be here at the end of it, but I can tell you something. The structures we're putting in today will ensure that Nigeria becomes a globally competitive producer and creator of wealth, so we can take our proper part in global growth. That's what this looks like, but it's not an individual thing. It's not about, I give you education, you go and make money and look after yourself. It's about nation building, and no nation can be built on a foundation of poor or no education.
All right, I guess that's a good place to anchor it. Thank you so much, Stan. Definitely, we'll keep tracking all those disbursements going forward. Thank you, Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, as the Chief Executive at NEL Fund. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and see you again soon, I hope.
Yes, for sure. All right, that's it. Now we'll come back. We'll look at artificial intelligence. What's next? That's in a moment. Just stay with us.
Out you come. With the shortage of brand new aircraft delivery across the world, Emirates decided to go it alone and refurbish over 200 of our existing planes at our own engineering facility. This makes it the largest retrofit program on the planet. For our customers, it means even greater consistency of a world-class product.
Know what's happening across Nigeria's various regions on Channels Television's Newsroom series. Every Monday, we bring you stories from the Southwest. And on Tuesday, the Northwest is our focus. We're in the South for midweek reports on Wednesday. And later in the week, the North Central takes center stage. The Southeast gets the spotlight on Fridays, and we close out the week with the Northeast on Saturday. Watch Newsroom Series, 3 p.m., Monday to Saturday, only on Channels Television.
Out you come. With the shortage of brand new aircraft delivery across the world, Emirates decided to go it alone and refurbish over 200 of our existing planes at our own engineering facility. This makes it the largest retrofit program on the planet. For our customers, it means even greater consistency of a world-class product.
So we see artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming the defining technology race of this decade, reshaping industries, capital markets, and the global economy. From automation and data analytics to generative AI, advanced robotics, businesses around the world, they're accelerating investment in emerging technologies in a bid to remain competitive. At the same time, investor appetite for AI is surging globally, with several highly anticipated AI-related IPOs expected to test market confidence. So how's Africa and Nigeria preparing for this AI moment? Joining me for this conversation now, we have Samuel Ubido, who's the chairman, Tech Innovate Group. He joins me right here in the studio. It's great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, Larry. Nice to meet you.
Fantastic. Welcome. So, yes, at this point, AI is becoming the center of most of the conversations so far. But how do we guard against Africa and Nigeria missing this AI moment?
That's quite a very interesting question. So what we see historically, some could argue Africa missed the industrial revolution moment. Now we're in the intelligent revolution moment. So I guess if you talk about AI, you have the computing layer. So you're talking the data centers. You have the apps or large language models, the OpenAIs and the Claudes, and you have applications, so AI-enabled applications. So what we've seen here is in Africa is we are using AI, if that makes sense. So we're putting data into ChatGPT for presentation, for meeting minutes, etc., which we're using. But at the same time, do we know or do you use any African-based AI or large language model? Now, these are conversations we need to start thinking, or how many data centers host OpenAI in Africa? Or how many data centers does Claude have in Africa? So ultimately, what Africa needs to do is not only should we be users of AI, we should think about start creating local large language models and also infrastructure that can support all things AI. Right.
So we don't end up, consuming, being
That's
that
correct.
Consumer of this incredible technology. All right. Right now, there's so much appetite for some of these IPOs, coming, especially the AI related IPOs. I'm getting calls from, a couple of friends asking me, I want to get involved with some of these IPOs coming up. We have the OpenAI. Investors watching in 2026, we have OpenAI. They filed confidentially for a US IPO this month. Potential valuation, $1 trillion.
That's correct.
We have Anthropic there, the creator of Claude AI. That's coming too. They've also confidentially filed for an IPO. Funding looking at $965 billion. That's valuation, approaching that.
Of course.
Then we have SpaceX with AI exposure through XAI. What is this telling us about where money is going?
So what we can see is, let's go back to historical context. So you can see the first set of billionaires, oil and gas, energy infrastructure. Then in the early 2000s, we saw the .com, so the Googles, the Microsoft, the Amazons. Now we're looking at the AI. So you talk about AI, most enterprises will become AI enabled. So how do you increase efficiency? How do you increase efficiency? How do you reduce cost? So what we're seeing is capital is going into AI at 3 levels. So we see a lot of investment going into cloud infrastructure. We see a lot of investment going into data centers. We see a lot of investment into going into AI companies. So, in those days they said, don't get a job. Now, if you get a job in an AI-based company and within 3-4 years they want to go public, you become an AI millionaire as an employee. So these are things that could be quite interesting. But I think ultimately, where I see the greatest opportunity is this. So investors are quite intelligent. A lot of apps, so people layering apps on top of AI and large language model. They'll hype, they'll eventually fall off. But core critical softwares solving solutions using AI. So you're talking financial inclusion, advisory to farmers, or educational, or even language learning. So these core components from a software level would grow. And then, of course, AI has power. You know, how are you going to power this? So what it does is not only does it create a tech ecosystem, but around it is an ecosystem around energy, around cooling, and around what sort of makes it grow. So I think it's going to be quite interesting times from the whole AI and investment ecosystem.
Yeah, we see the appetite for these IPOs growing.
Sure.
You know, right now. But these guys have not been able to tell us how they're going to make money.
Absolutely.
But they keep throwing money in there.
Yes.
How are you seeing that? Is that a risk for investors?
That's an interesting question. So if you look at, let's say, G42 in Abu Dhabi, they have quite a huge AI fund, and the UAE government have committed $1 billion into Africa from an AI investment point of view. I think ultimately the driver here would be productivity. So for example, if you own a data center, let's say, is similar to a filling station or a bank, right? A filling station is you hold oil and you sell to customers. A bank, you hold money and then you loan at an interest. Data center, the more AI apps that comes, you're going to need somewhere to host it locally. Now, we're hoping regulations make sure some of the data stays in Africa, which can enable the local ecosystem. And of course, I don't know, I'm a paid user of a few AI-enabled apps. Why, as a business owner, it gives me productivity. So a lot more people will start to pay to use these AI apps to ensure efficiency sort of things and go ahead. And I think a lot of government fund and subsidy might come just to increase digital ecosystem, because quite a few governments are increasing the digital presence and e-government. So I think AI would help in making things a lot more efficient.
Right.
So from a monetization point of view, I have a few AI apps which I pay for, which I didn't used to pay for because I want more of it, because I'm getting value. And of course, the more users of AI, that means we need more data centers, we need more cloud computing, and also we need more skill sets. So definitely, you know, skill set in that ecosystem would be of great value coming in the future. So those are sort of the few points I would sort of make on this.
All right, but before I let you go now, definitely looking at African governments right now. What should they be doing, policy-wise, to make sure we don't stay behind?
Sure. I think that's a very interesting question, because I'm a firm believer in Africa. And Nigeria, of course. And if you look at most trends, Africa have seemed to, let's argue and say, missed out or not been leading. But I think what AI does now, I'll call it democratized knowledge. What that means for me is, for example, even if you don't have the hardware computer, as long as you have a phone that has a mobile app, you can get access to Claude.
Sorry, just hold that thought. One moment. We're about to join a live broadcast now. Renewed Hope Ambassador, that's happening at Transco Hotel, Abuja. That's for DSTV subscribers, but you can follow the money right here on other platforms. Sorry to interrupt you there. You can continue now.
Sure. So of course, so if you look at the whole ecosystem around apps, so normally let's say as someone with not a lot of money, you don't have access to the best computing power ever, that limits you. But now, with AI, you can now have access to the best computing at a fair price, at a market entry price. So what that has done is make it a fair, equal ground. So from an economical point of view, you can apply for the best roles, etc., with the right computing power. As a government, I think the regulation needs to be strong, because what we don't want to do, I call it double taxation as a joke. What that means is we train a sovereign or a foreign-based AI solution without data, meaning, because the more you use an AI solution, you're training the large language model. So every day which we use any LLM-based system, large language model, we're training it. So let's imagine every day millions of Africans are training a large language model, which we don't own. Large language model is hosted overseas without data, and then we're now paying subscription for this. So can you imagine the context? So we are invested into AI solutions without data, without money. So I think definitely three things need to come into play. So around sort of hackathons and ecosystem enablers. So the government needs to create platforms whereby local AI solutions can come to breathe, if that makes sense, and it can facilitate the ecosystem. Number two, talk about local content. So some of these AI companies coming into Africa, let them have some local ownership. So let them have a registered Nigerian presence, or let them have a registered African presence, African office, right? An African academy, an African ecosystem that ensures that they're pouring back into the economy and going back. And then, of course, from the last element is just around financing. So what financing is available to ensure that also goes through. So
money. We all need that money.
Absolutely, my friend.
For this investment. Thank you so much. Samuel Ubido, Chairman, Tech Innovate Group. Thank you for coming today.
Bye for now.
All right, we'll take a quick moment now. Let's see what's happening in the global economy.
And it's the hump of the week. And let's bring you some of the latest stories making the rounds around the world in global news. And we're starting first with the U.S. stock market futures, which slid in early trade today after a volatile session on Tuesday. And this is coming as investors await inflation data that will set the stage for a highly anticipated Federal Reserve's policy decision next week. Now, the decline, which comes before the opening bell later today, also follows investors' reaction to the launch of self-defense strikes by the United States against Iran. Our Washington correspondent, Mary Bird, has an overview of U.S. market trading performance for Tuesday.
The U.S. stock market was mixed on Tuesday as the Dow Jones was up at 0.2%, the S&P 500 was down at 0.3%, and the heavy tech Nasdaq was down at 1%, as many investors were wanting to see the tension between Iran and the U.S., as this has had a major impact on the U.S. marketplace, as it also appears that the chip stocks seem to be having a challenging day, but the recovery of 1% down for the Nasdaq was a positive sign, as it was down by more than 3.5% throughout the day. So the recovery, even though not winning the day, it was an upward swing from what was seen earlier in the afternoon. Investors are continuing to watch the U.S. stock market to see if the Iran-U.S. conflict will continue to have an impact for days and weeks ahead.
That was a Washington correspondent, Maribert, giving us an overview of today's trading session on Wall Street. Now, still with the United States, solar energy overtook coal in the country's power generation in May, and that's the first time the renewable source has become the best fossil fuel in a calendar month. According to a report released by the clean energy think tank EMBA, which analyzes monthly and hourly data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, solar energy supplied 12.8% of U.S. electricity last month, while coal accounted for 12.2%. Now, the use of solar is surging just as the U.S. scrambles to add new electricity sources to meet the insatiable power needs of AI data centers. The U.S. solar industry has also managed to grow even as the Trump administration has taken steps to thwart its rise. Now, Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel has raised 90 billion yuan, which is about $550 million, from its first bond offering following its landmark $14.9 billion purchase of American rival U.S. Steel. Now, the 10-year tranche of the multi-part sale carries a 3.202% coupon, which is the highest for the company in about 30 years. Now, the acquisition had initially faced significant political pushback and union opposition, but was officially cleared to proceed on June the 18th of last year, after an extended U.S. government overview. Now, Nippon Steel's approach for the American Iconic Steel Corporation was first announced in December 2023. And still with Japan, the prices of corporate goods in the country jumped last month, signaling strengthening inflationary pressures rippling across domestic supply chains. According to the latest report by the Bank of Japan, the measure of input prices for Japanese firms, which is what you call the Producer Price Index, rose by 0.9% from a month earlier. Now, the rising producer price index reflects the growing willingness from the suppliers to pass on rising operation costs to their corporate customers amid higher costs of raw materials and energy due to the Middle East conflict, which shows no signs of abating. Meanwhile, analysts say the rising inflationary trend may prompt the BOJ to raise interest rates beyond a widely expected hike next week. Now, from Japan to China, which has started tapping its commercial crude reserves to help offset the supply shock from the Iran war. Industry sources say the world's biggest oil importers' inventory draws are expected to average about 1 million barrels per day in the coming months. That's about a third of the crude that China is no longer receiving since the conflict led to the near total closure of the Strait of Hormuz, but still pales in comparison with roughly 1.2 billion barrels the nation has in its commercial and strategic stockpiles. China has filled up its inventories to unprecedented level over the past year. It has started tapping those reserves in May and drew almost 25 million barrels in the month to June the 7th. That's Global News for Wednesday. I'll see you on Global News tomorrow.
All right, thanks so much, Anita. Well, the market is still trading right now. NGX, Abe Mortgage Bank, ICO, Vitafoam getting attention right now. Still near flat for the all-share index. Gold, that's down big, about 2%. Bitcoin, down big also, 1.11%. All prices are still up. Anita Edet will be back at 1:30 with more details. Thank you for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. Remember, buy low and sell high.